Thanks everyone for joining us on the Solar Objections live action role play. I have the pleasure to introduce a big UFC fan, fellow poker player, Solar Pro, and my friend, Solar Joe.
And we are live. Mr. Buffer is back introducing me. And we are actually multi-streaming from different places. We are on YouTube, LinkedIn, Twitter, Facebook. Just want to make sure everybody knows that. But today we have superstar Solar Pro Josh King. May not know who he is, but he has been a Solar Pro for the last 8 years. Just in Australia, which is a very mature market, but he is super experienced. He's been door knocking since he was 9 years old, so everybody should know that. But since 2018, he started the Sun Factory and has been doing amazing things since, but even before that. But I'm glad to have him on because he's a major influence on what to learn from the Australian market and also virtual. He's going virtual 100% now. So Josh, thanks so much for making the time to being on here, man.
No worries. And thanks very much again for using that old, very youthful looking picture of me for your graphic.
Hey, it is you, right? It is you.
It is me. I hate to disappoint, though. Don't look like that anymore, but that's all good.
Hey, more viewers you bring in, the better, baby. But it's all good. You know what? Today, guys, if you're happy Josh is on here, go ahead, put in the comments. Thanks, Josh, or let's go, or get some energy going here. If you have any questions for him, this is the time. Ask him questions about virtual, about the Australian market, or if you want an objection, want him to handle, he's ready to go. We are having some issues with our Solar Objections group not coming on. So we might be having some issues, looks like. But it is on my personal page and on YouTube, Twitter, and LinkedIn if you want to jump on there. But anyway, so today we're having Josh come on and doing a little bit of a training on virtual and a little bit of tips and tricks and what to learn from the Australian market. So let's go.
Love the graphics. Love it. Awesome. Yeah, I mean, there's a lot to learn. The Australian market, like you said, super mature. So, you know, my teachers always used to tell me in high school, you know, you got to learn from the past or it's going to repeat itself. And it's very true with solar, true with most industries, right? With the Australian market, anyone that's watching from the Australian market that's doing stuff in the US knows exactly what I mean. It is rough. I joined the Australian market, 2014, 2015. And, you know, even back then, I would say that the US market is potentially still slightly behind back then. So I would say in terms of total market, whether that's, you know, the customer education, the skill of solar companies and sales organizations, and even the infrastructure, maybe 6, 7, 8 years behind. I mean, but that's great for us, right? Because if you're able to look at a market like Australia, you can sort of take what you've learned, see those points. I've already started seeing a lot of stuff, history repeating, and sort of you can go back and think, okay, so what else happened, right? So me and my team have been racking our heads over the past year and saying, okay, well, we already saw this happen in the Australian market. Why don't we prepare for that? And because we know it's going to happen in the US. So it's interesting going that route. A few things that, well, actually, what do you think would be different? Where do you think the US market would go?
This is the thing, is that I know that pricing is dropping, right? And commissions are dropping. So as an industry, we have to know that's coming, and how do we prepare for that? That's my biggest thing, I would say.
Right. How do you prepare for the pricing dropping? Yeah. So the big thing, and it's number one on my list, top list, is the race to the bottom pricing, right? Yeah. So I always see that there's always three players in solar. There's your premium pricing, your skilled guys. They are selling a good pricing. There's good margins. They know how to add value to their customers. They're doing sales because of the value that they add to the customers, as opposed to the pricing or some, you know, fancy efficient panel or something. It's just their communication ability and clearly showing what solar can do for customers. Then you have your middle guys, right? And this is where a majority of people start out, right? Because nobody really wants to be the cheapest, right? You don't, but you also don't want to be the most expensive. So a majority of people start out in that middle phase, and their shtick to the customer is, hey, look, we're not the cheapest, but we're not the most expensive. So we're right in the middle, and we're going to treat you right. It's a nice idea, but then you have the peanut solar companies, as they call them, right? And these are the guys who they generally have external funding. They just come in, they want to take over the market, so they drop their pricing just sort of to take that Tesla, and they'll capture a section of the market, right? Such that they're pushing out a lot of other competition, and then when they have that infrastructure, when they have a certain amount of installs, then they can either start putting up their pricing, or potentially they're the only people left to go to get sort of inexpensive solar. What I see happening when you go to that race to the bottom pricing, first off, I don't support that, right? Don't do that. That's not good for an industry. It's not good for a market. But when that happens, that middleman, they disappear, because eventually everyone now knows of the peanut solar company pricing. Customers in the US will eventually know price per watt. They will literally know what a good price per watt is. And so, or at least
they don't like the
no idea.
They have no idea what that even means. But you're saying that's going to become normal. Everybody, homeowners know what that means.
They'll have a price per watt or a pricing in their head, whether it's accurate or not, because their friend got solar, they saw solar on TV, they saw radio. It's going to get so penetrated that they know pricing. So what's going to happen is you're going to get that middleman that says, hey, we're not the cheapest, we're not the most expensive. They have been relying on just an easy market to sell for such a long time that when they try to differentiate themselves from the peanut solar companies, right, the super low cost solar companies, they don't have enough in their arsenal. So they eventually just become an expensive, cheap solar company, right? Because the customer is looking at the cheapos out there and say, okay, but you guys are just a bit more, so what's different? But these guys, the middle guys, have been, just working in a really easy market for so long, they don't have that ability to separate themselves and add value. But then you're going to have your premium guys, right? That's the guys with great margins. You're selling premium systems. They've been adding value to their customers. That's how they've been getting sales. They're not going to have an issue because the difference in pricing alone from your peanut solar companies to their premium products is enough to warrant that for the customers. Okay, maybe something's different here. And then on top of that, they have that ability to provide enough value to the customer, because that's the only way they've been getting deals this whole time, right? They've never been the cheapest. So what have they had to rely on? Their ability to add value, their ability to actually sell, to communicate properly with the customer. So that's what happens when you encourage the race to the bottom pricing. Those two people only really last, and it gets messy. It's been a bloodbath in Australia. So it's
a bloodbath. That sounds like an interesting story. So it's been a bloodbath. So there's nobody in the middle, right? It's either the cheapest or your premium.
The only people I know that are still in the middle are like a few friends of mine. One of them owns a smart energy group. They gotta be it. They're doing maybe 150, 200 installs a week right now in Australia. They are premium in terms of they're giving the absolute best service. But because of their scale, they're able to offer it at a lower cost. They're not as cheap as the cheap companies out there, but because of their scale, they're able to offer premium cheaper than anyone else. But in terms of that price point, there's not many people out there that can offer super premium for a really good price point. So yeah, and now in Australia, it's just those massive volume companies. And there's a cookie cutter model. It's radio ads, TV ads, and they'll get like a sponsor, generally an athlete. So in Australia, they love footy. There's, it's just sort of rugby. Anybody knows what that is? They'll get a footy athlete, like a retired, national treasure footy athlete. He gets on TV and says, "Yeah, mate, these guys are the best. Get your solar now. Call this number and we'll get you sorted." Right? And that's the cookie cutter model. I'm good at that accent. I've lived there for the past decade. That's the cookie cutter model. So you see so many of these peanut solar companies doing that. Like, for example, a price, this is how bad it could get, right? In Australia right now, you can find a 6 to 7 kilowatt system for $2,000 Australian. It is nuts. And that is due to, you know, a bit of government incentive, but not overly incentivized, maybe slightly cheaper equipment costs, but it is just the market for 10, 15 years has been race to the bottom, race to the bottom. How do we get our pricing down? How do we cut corners? How do we install shitty gear? Like that's how what it gets to. And so if you want to run a successful company in Australia now, you either already have to be super well known, or you have to be selling at premium and know how to add value to customers. So it is a bloodbath. It's not nice. And so race to the bottom, you know, finding any way to offer your customers just the cheapest possible price, I don't support it, right? Stick to your guns. You know it's valuable to the customer. Offer them premium gear. Have good margins so you can take care of them post installation and all that. You know, it's going to happen anyway, right? Eventually, it'll happen in the U.S. market, but let's just hold off for a bit longer before we sort of market. That's sort of my thinking on it.
You're saying to make sure that we add the premium service that comes along with the solar project, not just selling bolts and metal and glass, but selling the service that goes with it and all the upgrades, you know, just the extra, not just cookie cutter, not just numbers game kind of thing, right?
This is I always tell customers, or at least in Australia, when say, oh, but how about these guys? They're charging this. I'll straight up tell them they're not even making enough money on that deal that if 6 months down the road, a year down the road, 2 years down the road, they need to send someone out there to do like a repair or something, they wouldn't be able to afford that because they're not even making enough money on you to afford a guy driving out there. Don't you know? So like that's what it gets to. So it's not just about offering the lowest price. It's not just about installing either. What happens later? What if you have to get someone out there? What about repairs and replacements? You got to make sure that you have margin to take care of your customers and offer them a better service, right? So it is a fine line to walk for sure.
That makes sense.
And then on top of that, you know, when that happens, right? So the market generally doesn't know that is happening at the time. They're blindsided by it. So what happens is the customer will, the market will choose those lower price points. And then, you know, there's going to be a delay of a year, 2 years, 3 years in which customers realize, oh, you know, I just got screwed over. I'm not getting the proper service. And so what happens at that point is the market starts switching and saying, okay, well, now we're really skeptical of lower costs and skeptical of the entire industry. So, you know, that's really detrimental because when you're actually trying to provide a good service to somebody, they are put off because we've had a few bad years of people screwing over customers. So that is in terms of warranties. That is in terms of you know, branding as well, a big thing that I'll get into as well. Customers will then understand and know brands. And what you're going to find is right now in the US, what do we install? We install LG, QCell, REC, like some pretty high grade gear. Like in Australia, if you were to install LG panels or REC or any of these stuff in Australia, it's like top notch. But what these companies will start doing is as soon as they start, and they've probably already started, they'll start putting millions of dollars into a marketing budget for their brand. One really good example of this is an inverter called Fronius. Have you heard of a Fronius inverter?
Mm-hmm.
So they spent a lot of money, and I'm actually not even sure how Fronius is perceived in the US. Is it perceived as a low grade, mid grade, high grade inverter? Or?
Yeah, it's not one of the top two options we're using. It's not
okay. So in Australia, it is the shit. And the reason is because they spent all this money on marketing to Australians about it being Austrian, I believe Austrian made or German made, and the Aussies love that. If you say something's German made or Austrian made, they froth over it, right? Even though it's probably assembled in China. And so there's this massive wave, and they were super overpriced. They were double the price of anything else. And so we started getting customers saying, look, if you can install a Fronius inverter, I'm out, I'm not doing it. You know, so people started selling Fronius inverters. After a few years of this, we saw Fronius inverters started dying out in the Australian heat and just fizzling out, right? But then we'd have these lower cost, lower grade, Chinese manufactured inverters, GoodWe, SAJ, they were outperforming the Fronius inverters, right? And they were a third of the price for the customer. So the perception of brands and stuff is also going to be a big thing. And so my second warning to anybody that's in the US market that hasn't experienced yet is you have your pricing, but you also have your brands. If you're selling on brands alone, right, instead of the savings, what the panels can actually do for you, as opposed to the name that the sticker that's on the panel, you're going to get screwed over because the perception of certain brands is going to change, right? And even if let's say you have a high quality equipment and you're selling that brand right now, as the market grows, it is the US, the marketing budgets of these companies, as soon as they start ramping up, is going to be massive. And so your favorite brand right now that you know is really good, it might get covered in the marketing budgets of lower grade equipment. So if you're basing your whole script, your whole, whether it's door knocking pitch, in-home virtual, off of you having the best brands, that soon as well is going to die off. You really need to start backing up and focusing on what solar can do for that customer, the savings, right? We actually don't mention brands early on with a conversation with our customer. And if they ask, we say, hey, look, that's a good question for later, right? When we move on. Because if we get them focused on brands and they have a different conception about it, it could be a dark rabbit hole. Right?
Yeah, that makes sense. And yeah, virtual would definitely don't try to bring up too much about brands. And that's probably pretty normal in our solar conversations.
Yeah.
But yeah, that makes a lot of sense where the one company sounds good right now, but it could totally change in the future.
100%.
That's a good point. I like that.
Absolutely. And yes, and I see I'm trying to get an understanding of brands in the US. It's different because not a lot of people know about brands. Customers have really no idea about brands. But what I'm seeing right now is that there's some pretty good quality gear getting installed in the US. I haven't really seen a lot of lower quality gear moving into the market. I'm sure people out there are pushing lower quality gear, but from my
main brand, there's like the Solar Edge inverter and then the Enphase.
Solar Edge, Enphase, yeah, LG, QCell, REC. In Australia, laundry list of brands.
You know why?
Well, a few reasons. They're closer to China, so they get everything, right? I know I've lived through the Jinko era. Jinko was the main brand. Seraphim, we loved a good Seraphim. Trina, JA. I mean, every solar brand in the world. I've probably been through a phase at which that was the brand to sell because everyone knew about it in Australia.
Yeah, because it's the solar pros. Whatever they know is what the homeowners know, right?
But eventually it's the homeowners that start asking for the brands, right? Yeah, it is a slippery slope. It's a rabbit hole you never really want to go down. But yeah, and then like I was saying, as soon as that brand is out, right? Then customers have a negative connotation towards it, regardless of how good or bad it was. Maybe a manufacturer gets negative press or something. You need to stick to the fundamentals, right? Don't focus on selling on your price. Don't focus on selling on your brands. Focus on selling the benefits to your customer and your rapport with the customer, right? If you do that, if you have your fundamentals and your philosophy is rooted in a strong base like that, regardless of how the market goes, you now have built your infrastructure of sales on how to add value to a customer and what this is going to do for them, as opposed to gimmicks, really, right? And so that's a really important thing there. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
Can you almost see it happening as well?
Yeah, like it does. It definitely makes sense, and that's something where I'm already, preaching that. So it makes me feel better that I'm saying the right things and saying the right things, because that's how you have to sell solar. Solar is not about the brands. I don't think homeowners even ask about that until we bring it up many times, or they've talked to 10 solar pros and now they're asking about their name brand, right? But in the beginning, they don't even know what to ask for. So it's on us. We're bringing that information up.
Exactly. Yeah. Right now, there is zero reason to bring up brands, right? Zero reason. Eventually, the customers would be more savvy and bring them up. But and then there's also rebates as well. Like if you're basing your pitch off of rebates, whether it's rebates, incentives, anything like that, if anything, or net metering as well, massive piece of the puzzle here. Australia had a net metering program. It was actually a bit more than a net metering program. Average pricing in Australia per wattage was maybe 25 to 35 cents. And then we had a metering program, which was maybe 10 years ago, maybe 10 years ago, in which your extra production got paid out at 55 cents. So it wasn't even just a net metering, it was an even more incentive. Like you were literally making more money than if you had used it from the utility company. Wow. And that got a lot of people onto solar initially. And then there's also lots of different rebates, lots of different extras to bake it on. So it was, very easy to sell solar. It was just literally a no-brainer. In my opinion, the US is a no-brainer for customers right now. But back in Australia 10 years ago, it was just, they didn't have to pay anything, right? And they made a bunch of money. You would hear stories about people making $5,000 a year, 10 grand a year from their we call them feed-in tariffs, because that was at 55 cents. And right now is a very tricky time because the US has net metering for a lot of utilities. And I know a lot of sales guys are relying on that to sell. Do figure out another way to sell, man, because that's not going to last.
Net metering
it will not last. The utility companies will find a way. Either there will be deadlines, but it will be regulated out as soon. Well, I mean, they're probably working on it already, to be honest. It's exactly the same in Australia. It's an incentive to go for it. Cool, we want to hit our targets. We're going to make it easy for you. But then it's the infrastructure alone isn't going to be able to handle it. We had South Australia. If you guys heard, Elon went and built that big Tesla battery a few years ago in South Australia. The solar, it got so bad that their infrastructure couldn't handle the feed-in, right? The excess energy. Their infrastructure couldn't handle it, so then they cut all of the feed-ins out. It didn't even just drop. In Australia, it's dropped down to maybe 10 cents now, so maybe a third of what they're paying. But in South Australia, they just had to cut it out. And massive regulation on approvals of new systems because the infrastructure wasn't there. And the market penetration in the US is what, single digits right now? In Australia, it's 20, 30, 40%. So, and Australia has a tenth of the population. When the US gets to that point, right? When we're having 20, 30% market penetration, which will happen pretty soon. It's not 10 years away. It's pretty soon. The infrastructure is not going to handle that. So your net metering, your rebates as well are going to drop. So relying on those net metering feed-in tariff rates and your rebates to get sales, again, is not the best way to do things, right? Showing value to your customers, showing them, free energy as opposed to, net metering. Yeah, it's all about the net metering. That won't last, right? And you're going to have to change your pitch up when that happens. So I would always say just prepare for what the market is gonna look like in a few years. So you're not scrambling around and stuck in that middleman position and having to backpedal and change everything up.
Storage will be really important too going into the future.
Oh yeah, yeah, because of course, like if you have net metering right now, like there's almost an argument that is a battery. You know what I mean? So when net metering dies off, or at least when the rate at which you're getting, so for example, if it's not a one-to-one credit and it drops to maybe half or a third or a quarter of what they would pay, then battery storage is going to come in, right? And although really what you want at that point is you want a big list of customers to call up and say, hey, we just got a new battery rebate. Solar rebate's gone now, but battery rebate's here. We're going to come over and install it tomorrow, right? Let's get ready to go. So that's going to be massive. Right now, batteries, I always suggest to not go batteries right now for customers. In my opinion, we will have battery rebates in Australia. Eventually, specifically battery rebates came out on top of everything we had. And this pricing just dropped, right? Because pricing for batteries right now is ridiculous. Might as well get a generator in most cases. So, but yeah, that's also one thing to look out for. And it is history does repeat itself. So setting yourself up, your individual self, your sales organization, your systems, whatever it looks like, to give the customer value, to be selling them the value of having a power station on the roof compared to selling them based off of the best brands, best warranties, best rebates or net metering, because it's difficult to restructure sales pitch. And when your organization has a sales philosophy and you need to switch it up, in the matter of a few weeks or you die, it's tough, right? It's very tough. But those are some of the similarities and sort of warnings, I guess I would say, in terms of like really the infrastructure. Another one would definitely be regulations. I think I briefly went over that as well. But in Australia, we have something called the CEC, the Clean Energy Council. This is a private group, although they're now very integrated into the government, which a lot of people don't like or understand. And they're the watchdogs of solar in Australia. And so when you get a system installed, you need to have an inspector certified by the CEC to go out and make sure the work that was done is correct. When I came to the US and saw some of the installations or what was possible in the US, my first thought was like 50% of these installations would get knocked back in Australia. So we're really going to see that. Like, of course, the US loves to regulate things. It's going to be interesting to see how the federal and state regulations vary, and if certain states, approve certain regulations or not. But regulatory bodies will pop up, and they will be on the sales guys. They will be on the installers. You're going to see people lose licenses left and right, especially when it gets into the media. John and Mary, 75-year-old couple, got installed 5 years ago, have been paying their loan, but their system was never turned on. That is a classic story in Australia, because it was a fly-by-night system, boom, in and out. And so that's why these regulatory bodies came in. So be wary of that. Obviously, it's good for quality of system, but you just need to watch out for that. It can get too overregulated. One thing that we don't like in Australia that's happened is that there is a federal rebate that's come in. It's roughly, anyone in Australia in the chat could correct me on this, but I think it's roughly $3,500 at the moment for a system up to 10 kilowatts or something like that. But you can only claim that if you are a paying member of the CEC, which is technically a private group regulatory body in Australia. So it's like, the only way we can get government funds is if we're paying this regulatory body an annual membership. Hey, I mean, maybe that's the best way to do it. It doesn't sit right with me, but hopefully, we don't get to that point. But, the rebates and making the sales guys' job easier with tax incentives and rebates may get to that point where you need to play ball and do things a certain way in order to offer that to your customer and have that competitive advantage over people that don't, right? So being clean in your sales, not being sketchy, doing the right stuff, getting your installs done properly. Anyone that's watching right now that is, cutting corners with installs, it's not worth it. I promise you, in the long run, you will get screwed. It is a pain in the ass. Sell at good margins, sell at good stuff, but just get the install done properly. Customers will come back, finance companies will come back, especially in the US. It's really not worth it cutting corners. And regulatory bodies hardcore regulatory bodies will come into play and increase their standards, knock back installs till you get out there, or revoke your licenses. So that will, definitely come out. There's a question: how long net metering for you?
I was going to do that in 1 second. So that's perfect. I think that was an amazing segment right there. I would love to do another segment about going virtual, but I wanted to just, first of all, say that there's an issue with the live stream on the Solar Objections group. So that's why you see we're not getting the viewers we usually get. It's because what happened was I actually took myself off as admin just by literally clicking a button. So I try to go back on. I don't have admin rights, so they kicked me off of the Objections group, but we'll put back on soon. But I actually put it in the post So if you guys want to check it out, it's also on the personal page. Before we go to the next segment of going virtual, there's a couple of comments. I want to just jump in real quick, Josh.
Cool.
Jeffrey Douglas said, "Bam. You guys are magic. Just got a bill from a customer and knocked yesterday while watching this." And then we got Sal Giano. I think he has a question. I am in net billing already. How long net metering for you? What's a better market? All I know is net billing. So can you talk more about net metering and how it's different in different markets? And I can help you out with that too.
Yeah, I mean, the big thing for sales guys, and it was a challenge for me and my guys as well, is that the US has so many utility companies. I don't know the number, thousands, tens of thousands.
It's probably one of them.
And some states are decentralized, some states. So you really, if you're ever going to go with a customer, before you speak with them and you go into the numbers, you need to have a plan, right? Because if you go in and you haven't checked if their utility company has net metering, or maybe their net metering has a certain limit, or maybe there's stipulations to the net metering, certain system sizes. If you go in without a plan and promise certain things and base your numbers off of that, you're going to shoot yourself in the foot. So what I always tell my guys to do is, if you're uncertain, if it's not one that you already know already, right? We do a lot of installs in Georgia. Cool, we know Georgia Power, boom, right off the bat. But if you got some random one, they haven't heard about it, or they don't know for certain, get on Google, you're finding that. Or if you can't find information, you're calling their utility company. Cool, what's your net metering program? Do you have one? What stipulations do you have? Is there a system size maximum? What rates for certain tiers? All this wonderful stuff. You got to have a plan though. You got to know exactly what you can offer that customer, because the worst situation is you go in, you're offering them, you're showing what these numbers look like with net metering and promising these things, or maybe you sell a system that's too big and it kicks them out of net metering, and you have to backtrack, and now your customer loses faith on you. So my big thing is know exactly what's going on with your customers, or if you are a customer, call your utility company and find out exactly what the stipulations are. Because sometimes sales guys will have no idea, and you can't really blame them. There are so many
either. They don't even know what their own stipulations are.
that is well, right? But that's important, because there's just so much variations on them.
Yeah, man. So I appreciate that. I know we got another segment here. Is it cool? We do a little bit of virtual training too.
Let's do it. Yeah.
All right. So virtual is a big want right now. Everybody in the market, and everybody who's knocking doors, they want to get virtual. Anybody who's, everybody wants to get virtual somehow, but it's not easy. There's tips and tricks you need to know. What can you tell us? Anything you want to start with?
So everyone should look into it. It might not be for everyone. There are definitely certain types of people that I know that they will always be good just knocking doors and closing deals in-house. But we moved ours. I was running a massive door-to-door operation from 2015 to 2017, 2018, just hundreds of door knockers across the country, multiple states, and it was killing. But really interesting, my history about virtual and phones and digital is that I was working for this call center. This was before I got into solar in Australia. It was a bit of a sketchy call center, selling, the investment packages. I was a young kid. I had no clue what I was doing, but I got taught these really interesting ways to communicate with people over the phone, right? And then, so I had always done, always into cold calling. I was always on the phones. So I was building a few doors teams early in the day, but then also I always had a calling operation on the side, generally cold calling, just rock hard cold data. Then in 2017, I was living in East Africa, and I met this guy who was selling car parts over Facebook. And I'm like, what do you mean you're selling car parts over Facebook? And he showed me Facebook ads, right? He showed me this magical world of digital marketing. And I'm like, interesting. So when I went back to Australia in 2017, 2018, I'm like, cool, how about we do this for solar? So we cut off all of our marketing budget for doors and phones, and we just smashed Facebook. I think I spent like a mil in 4 or 5 months initially, and I didn't know how to spend that money. So that's not bragging. That was just, it was bad. But we were getting a positive ROI on it, even still, right? Like really good ROI on it. Thinking back of what I could have done, I could have gotten like 3-4x, but But and so we were one of the first retailers in Australia to primarily and only use digital to fuel a virtual team, a phone-based team. And so that's where we really started it. Then in 2019 or in 2020, we moved our entire operation virtual. No, sorry, actually 2019, moved our entire operation virtual. And I had reps all over the world in multiple continents, multiple countries. And I sort of realized, wow, the potential for this is massive. The pros for virtual are a lot more than people think. It's not just that you can sell solar in your underpants, drinking a beer on your couch, right? First off, you have your appointment logistics. So when you're going in home, you have to worry about drive times. You have to worry about areas, of course. You can't get leads in from Ohio if you're living in California and you're doing in-home. So the logistics alone can double or triple your efficiency. If you're able to do 4 or 5 appointments in a single area in a day in-home, for virtual, if you can fill your schedule up, you can be doing 10 appointments a day, right? You're off the call with the next one, on the call with the next one. Boom, 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 boom. You can make it very, very efficient. And so just the logistics alone are super powerful. And then volume follows with that. You can be doing 10 a day. And also, all my digital marketing guys out there that are watching this, that if you are targeting a larger audience with digital, your cost per acquisition, your cost per lead goes down, right? Because Facebook, YouTube, Google, whatever, has a much larger data pool to put its algorithms onto. So it can find the people that you want a lot quicker for a lot cheaper. So the volume of your leads, the cost of your marketing, and the amount of appointments that you can book in for yourself or your team just immediately expands, right? And so, you can also get that remote work. Like I said, you can work from anywhere in the world. I have sold solar. I sold a deal in Antarctica early 2020. I was on an expedition.
Antarctica?
I was on an expedition from Ushuaia, Argentina, down to Antarctica, and I think we were right about there. I think we were on the mainland, and I finalized the deal over the phone. It might be the first deal ever sold in Antarctica, but it was remote. It was virtual. There's no way I could have done that, right? Unless it was virtual. It was horrible, shitty Wi-Fi. I paid an arm and a leg for it, but I knew this customer was keen, so I'm like, screw it. Paid like $30 for Wi-Fi for the day and got on the phone and closed them. But you can do it from anywhere. We were running our virtual teams in Bali, in Indonesia, during all of COVID, on tropical beaches in beautiful villas, just selling solar in the Australian market. And so the opportunities there are massive. And if anyone's ever done remote work, you know what I'm talking about. If you have an opportunity to sell remotely, it is next level. You can get out of your home, get out of your country, go somewhere new and on vacation and still be making solar money, which is very good money, right? So it really does that. And then also it opens opportunity for talent, right? So you're able to access people that you wouldn't be able to before. And that's not just location. Like I know I have a lot of overseas guys and they're weapons. But it's also, for example, people with physical disabilities who couldn't do in-house, right? There is a lot of talent there. People who, for some reason or another, could never be in office or could never do in-home presentations. You have access to this pool of talent now that are yearning to do something they haven't been able to, whether recently or their entire life. You can access that and give them opportunity. So there's a lot of pros to it. If you can master it, and I'll get into sort of the basics of sort of what you need to do that, but if you can master it, if you can crack the virtual code, you can have a team across the world selling into one of the most gold industries and markets right now in the US, and completely automated and over the phone on your computer, right? So
like, really, if you think about it,
it's the dream. It is the dream, but it does take a bit to get there. The cons of it, I'll go over a bit about the cons and the challenges, and then we'll go into sort of what it looks like to be successful at it. But the cons are, if you're really used to having an in-office door-to-door team, for example, we have our door team here, and in the mornings you're getting people pumped up here. Let's go, sales on the board, boom, John won yesterday, 1 clap. Susie, 3 appointments yesterday, let's go, okay. Balloon pops, presentation bonuses, whatever. Everyone's hyped up. The music's blasting. Everyone that's been part of a door-to-door channel knows the vibe. It's really difficult to do virtually, right? So you got to find ways to get that vibe going, get that environment going, and make them feel as though they're a part of something. Because when they don't have someone over their shoulder, when they don't have someone blasting music and pumping them up and you know, walking with them or in office, that piece is missing. So inspiring your reps to keep going, keep getting on the calls, keep pounding through the leads is a bit different, if not harder, but it is doable. And you can find ways to do that. For example, and if anyone's trying to find a way to do this, you're welcome for this. Jackbox games over Zoom. It is a very good team building thing. Friday night drinks, top performers, you Uber Eats a crate of beer or their favorite Uber Eats restaurant to their place. You should go on Zoom, share your screen, download Jackbox games from the App Store. And they're just super fun games. Everyone can see it on your screen. Everyone's connected. They're having a good time. Little stuff like that, just continually throughout the week, having that environment is so important. It doesn't matter how good the opportunity is and whether they can sell, you know, on a beautiful beach in Costa Rica. They still need that environment, right? So that's super important.
That's such a big deal because nobody really even talks about that. But virtual is not just get on a Zoom, close a deal. That's like you have a whole system and structure and environment that needs to be associated with this. So that's a good point. I appreciate that one.
100%. And also management, right? Managing people over virtual is very difficult as well. Or I'll just say different, right? It's different. You just need to be in constant communication, build that authority with your reps if you're a manager that you wouldn't potentially be able to do or that you can't do because you're not in person with them. Go on, Carlos. Carlos is joined here. Structure, like you said, structure, right? You need to have a structure and form habits for your guys. If they're not showing up to the office every day at 11 a.m., 9 a.m., 1 p.m., they don't have their alarm set for getting out of bed, doing their general habits and knowing that they have to be in office or have to be on turf at 1 p.m. or have to hit the phones at 12 p.m. They don't have that structure anymore. So you need to provide that to them. Mm-hmm. If they don't have that structure and that habit, that daily routine, they become complacent. So if you see a rep on a Zoom call in their bed or, you know, sitting on their couch, you pull them aside and say, hey, mate, let's come on, get on your desk. Let's go. This is a job, right? You need to remind them of that because it is easy to get complacent. And so you can offer that environment in which they can do some virtual, but you also need to remind them, hey, this is a legitimate job. You know, you need to show up to work. You know, I don't need you to wear, you know, button-up shirts to Zoom calls, but, you know, take this seriously. Give them that structure, right? Give them that structure. And
okay, you're doing it from like a managerial perspective, and that's usually is like virtual. How do I do this? But like you can run a team virtual, and you have to have this structure down for them to be successful.
It's not even just a team, for yourself as well, right? If you're not getting out of bed like you normally would, going to an office job, if you're doing calls in your bed or, you know, slouching about, if you haven't showered, if you haven't gotten dressed, then it's all the same stuff, right? That's going to build up over time. If you're an individual, you still need to have those habits. You still need to have that structure for yourself. But yeah, just for everybody. If you know, look good, feel good, do good. Like I said, you can sell from your couch, holding a beer in your underpants, but you got to have a very strong mentality and your habits already formed if you want to do that, right? If you don't have those habits formed yet, working remote, right? If you haven't worked remote with consistent results for a few years and you're just stepping into it, maintain your structure just like you were going to the office, but instead of going to the office, sit down at your desk, right? At 9 a.m. instead, right? But super important.
That's a good tip, right?
Yeah, so those are the basic challenges. The virtual, in terms of the sales, I mean, I could go on forever, but I think a big thing that people sort of want to hear more, and what I'm seeing is the tools and the processes that you need in order to get up. Like, look, I'll briefly touch base on the sales. If you're doing doors, if you're doing in-home, don't assume that you can do over the phone sales as well as you can do doors. You don't have a lot of things. You don't have body language, right? And that's 50-60% of your entire communication. So find people or find, you know, specific phone-based training, virtual training, and look at the differences of how they communicate. A big thing is You have to figure out what that customer is thinking without looking at them, without looking at the pictures on their wall, without looking at their husband to see their facial expressions when they say a dumb thing or you say an objection handle. You got to listen to the nonverbal communications, the little things they put in between the sentences or how they ask. Their tonality is a big one. So a big thing with me is, first off, just realize you got to find a way to really listen to your customer in a way you potentially haven't already. And so that is a big thing. I can go on a lot about that, but I think the two big things that I'd want to go over with virtual is the tools and the processes that you're using and your lead sources. Okay. So with your tools and processes, you need to utilize tech, even indoors in home, but especially with virtual, you need to be utilizing tech. Long gone are the days in which you can just get a doors team and a Google Sheet and call yourself a solar company, right? That's how we used to run it back in the day. Our doors teams have pieces of paper, call in, our reps would put the customer's name in a Google Sheet. We called the schedule. If the customer no-showed, we had zero follow-up. We had no text messages, no emails going out. If you're still doing that, hey, look, even if you're getting results, fantastic. But with virtual, you need to utilize tech. So a big thing about the systems that you're using, first off, your booking platform systems. I'll speak to that in two ways. One, if you're an individual, you need to make it very, very easy to use for either yourself or your customer. If you're doing pre-booked appointments, I love Calendly. It's super simple. It has almost everything I need, but it's just simple. It's so plain. You can pretty much factor in all the settings, and it has a lead distribution algorithm. So if you're running a team and you have, for example, guys that are doing better than others, you can set, for example, in Calendly, and there's a few others that do this, you can set where those leads go to, where those appointments go to based off of your preferences. If you're an individual, Calendly is also super helpful. But I mean, I've seen people use Google Calendar and, the basic stuff if you're individual. When you're individual, with booking, you just need to make sure that you can get your availability in there. You can put it into the system, and it's only going to show the availability to yourself or your customers, right? And then just a very easy way to maintain your schedule. The big thing that I see that people mess up on is they don't have a very nice, simple GUI, a graphic user interface. So they get mixed up. Okay, when's my appointments? They write it down in a diary here. They put it in a Google Calendar over here. Keep it simple. Just get a Calendly account, get a booking system account, Google Calendar account. Keep it in one place. Very, very simple. And add as many notes as possible. If you got the customer, you've gone through a discovery call or a first call. They had a few dogs barking in the back. Always get that in your notes as well. It's nice to think you'll always remember stuff when you're on the call, but it's not really going to happen. So your booking system, nice and simple. Don't have to get too crazy on your booking system. And if you do have a team, that lead distribution model is really, really good to maximize your efficiency. Dialers are close to my heart because of all the cold knocking campaigns I've run. I have used every bloody dialer under the sun. If you're an individual, and depending on where you're getting your leads, like you want to do virtual, I would strongly suggest cold call every single day. It doesn't matter if you have someone else doing leads for you or door knockers doing things for you, but get on the phones, man. Dialers are a big piece of that. You no longer need to manually put in numbers. There are many dialers out there. They're automated dialers, power dialers. They have different algorithms that dial 3 at a time, 1 at a time, lots of different stuff. Get out. There's heaps out there. Some really well-priced ones as well. One thing that I would say though, if you are running a relatively large team, or you're onboarding a call center, or maybe if it's only actually no, even if it's just yourself, this is really important, and nobody says this. That you need to make sure that your dialer's algorithms treats fresh leads accordingly. So if you have a fresh lead that comes in through your systems, through your booking page, whatever it is, you need to make sure that dialer is putting the lead at the top of your list. You wouldn't imagine how many dialers don't actually do this. So for example, if we have a Facebook campaign going and we're getting 50 leads a day, right? And I have like a pool in my dialer of like 300, 400 like no answers that we're still running through. If that dialer just throws those 50 fresh leads at the bottom or in the middle somewhere, what's the point of that? You got to be on top of them immediately. So whenever you do a dialer, generally they will never explain how the algorithm works. Message the support and literally say, hey, how does your algorithm treat fresh leads? Whether it's manually entered or entered through an API or a webhook. Does it put it to the top of your call lists? Because if you're doing that and if you're online, you don't have to look at your lead sheet. You just know that if you have a lead that comes from Facebook, Google, YouTube, whatever, straight to the top, right? And then you're connected. And what you want is, hey, John, yeah, just following up your solar application. Oh, wow, that was quick. That was 5 minutes ago. You guys are good. That's it, man. We're good. And you're on, right? Immediately a positive interaction. So with dialers, find one, but make sure the algorithm is set there.
I love that because I never even thought about that, because there is an algorithm. Obviously, numbers are being dialed and called, and if not, you might be. That's a great tip, man. Thank you.
It is. It's a niche little thing that I think not a lot of people know about. And a big thing again, another thing is contact platforms. So I think we had this chat before, and I think Carlos actually asked this: do you prefer straight phone or Zoom, and why? All right. I like Zoom. Your way of doing Zoom, Joe, though, is the only way I will accept as feasible. So I'll explain why I don't like Zoom, and then maybe we'll explain how you do it.
Yes, sir.
I don't like Zoom because there are issues that are going to increase your no-show rates. That could be a customer is not tech savvy. They have no clue how to work Zoom. They're old. They don't want to go through the hassle. Their friend just invited them for coffee. So do they want to go have a coffee or a tea, or figure out how this whole Zoom technology works? It sounds silly, but it happens, right? And they just no-show you. They ghost you, right?
Yep.
And they never follow up with you because they're too embarrassed. They couldn't figure it out. The second reason is they don't want to show your face to someone that they never met before, right? So that's a big thing, right? It's not good to not factor that in. Now, what Joe does, and this is the only method I've ever heard that I would accept, I wouldn't do it myself, but I would accept, is he'll get on the phone with them, he'll build rapport with them, he'll start that conversation, start it rolling, and if the vibe is right, if the customer's laughing, hey, Mr. Customer, hey, look, you want to do a Zoom? I can go over these things and we can really take a look at it, right? Oh, what's Zoom or whatever? But at that point, you're good. At least you minimize the risk of them no-showing that appointment.
I make it even easier. I don't even use the word Zoom. Hey, is it okay if I show you my screen? So you see
and you send them the link and you then click it.
Yeah. Make it nice and smooth. So it's not a decision they have to make. It's just a normal, obviously, next step. But yeah.
So that's fine. But the big thing there is, right, they've showed up to the appointment. And the big thing with Zoom is it's no-shows. It's no-shows waiting to happen. So
I was getting ghosted like left and right. I even made a meme because it was just me sitting there on the swing. I don't even see that waiting for, and I learned that when you bring up the word Zoom, they say, yeah, sure, see you there, no problem. But in their mind, they're like, what am I going to do? And then they think of any reason why not to do things. That's the homeowners are. So once you give them an easy passage to another phone call, that makes the transition. I don't think I've gotten ghosted nearly as much with a phone call. Right?
Definitely.
Good point.
And okay. So you have your, let's say you get your pitch down. You're used to speaking people over the phone. You've gotten all those beats. You have your dialer. You have your booking platforms. You have your tech set up. What's the final step? The final step is your leads, right? And this is a big thing as well. You're going to see, and if you think it's bad now with people trying to sell you leads, it is going to be overrun. So you're really going to, if you're moving virtual or if you have a virtual team and you're looking for lead sources, you got your system set up, you got your pitch, you know how to communicate. Your leads, right, obviously are the backbone to the solar operation. A wise man once told me a solar company is simply a lead gen company that also sells solar. So your lead source is the backbone of your operation. You need to make sure that you're getting them from the right place. You're not getting screwed off. I made the mistake of when I first did inbound, spending all that money and not asking for help, not bringing the right people on, not finding additional sources of leads. We blew our budget out, right? Still made great money because it was solar in the heyday, but man, we could have made so much more and it would have solved a lot of issues. So I always tell people with lead sources, you got to be careful about the digital marketers approaching you. They're not all bad, right? They're not all bad, but know what to look out for, because these guys literally may have never sold anything in their life, never sold solar, never been in the solar industry, and have just joined digital marketing as well because they heard it's good and then said, oh, how about solar? I'll try this. And they've just learned how to put some budget on a Facebook ad and see if it works, right? You got to be careful. I would suggest put your own money into Facebook ads, whether it's $1 a day, doesn't matter. Put your own money into it just so you understand the infrastructure of Facebook ads, of YouTube ads, of Google, and what's possible, what's not possible, what type of, just very roughly the ROIs you can get. Obviously, a master is going to be able to do a lot better than you, but just a very easy idea, right? Put $100 a week, right, towards a Facebook ads campaign or Google ads campaign, just to see how it's structured, right? The goal isn't to get leads. Maybe you struck gold and maybe you're really good at it right away, but just get the basics of it so that when you do go for lead sources, whether it's a digital marketer or whether it's someone, using your ad spend to book appointments for you, there's a million different structures now. You know the lingo, you know how to talk to them, you know how to make sure, hey, but do you guys do this? Do you know about this? And just to test them out a bit, because I get approached by probably 10, 15 digital marketers a week. And generally I can shut the conversation down within 30 seconds of them talking to me, 90% of them, right? My first question is, what's your personal ad spend on Facebook? Not your clients, what's your personal ad spend on Facebook? If they tell me anything under like 100K, it's like, I don't know, probably you've either been doing it for a very long time and spent a very small amount, or you've just jumped into it. My personal Facebook, not company Facebook, I think is like 800, 900K, right? So you just learn a bit from that, right? Super important. Be careful of that. Learn the basics of digital. Don't have to spend a lot of money. There's so many free courses and stuff you can learn. Alternatively, you don't have any cash for that. Find some cheap, aged, dirty, rotten, cold leads and get on the calls, right? And just start dialing, right? That is the equivalent of door knocking, right? In the virtual game.
Digital door knocking.
Yeah, digital door knocking. If you can cold call cheap leads, if you can put the time in, keep that positive mindset and just smash the calls for hours a day, days a week, and get results, what costs do you have, right? Cold data is extremely inexpensive. Dialers, you don't even have to use a dialer if you don't want to. It'll maximize your efficiency, but they're not that expensive either. If you can make that work, right, then go on to the more expensive stuff. But the fundamentals should really be you getting used to the cold calling, you getting used to hitting those customers and getting further than anyone else has before, booking them in and closing them. That is I don't know. Whenever I speak on the phone now, I speak differently because I've been doing cold calling for so I know how to direct a conversation, and it helps, right? And if you've closed virtually, or if you've done virtual or in-home closing, but you've never done virtual closing, cold calling and getting people from a cold lead to a booked appointment is just as valuable in building those skills to be able to move that conversation forward to the end goal, and having that structure.
Do you think it's the same like for door to door? It's usually the structure is that, well, a lot of times is that they knock the door, they set up the appointment, get the power bill, and they have a closer close it. Do you think it's similar with virtual, where you can be a door knocker virtually and then have somebody else close it? Do you think it's easier for that person to close it because it's virtual?
Oh, 100%. So I've run successful operations doing both. So we do, we have our rep team. Those are our first callers, our reps, our discovery callers, whatever you want to call them. They're making that initial contact. They're setting up appointments for your consultants. Now, when you start out, if you're an individual or if you have a small team, what you're going to want to do is you want to understand the entire process. So you're going to want to be the cold caller. You want to book your own appointments in, and you want to see that process from beginning to end. But as you scale up, right, you want to maximize your availability and your options. So getting a guy who's their job is primarily just hitting those leads for you. You're paying them well, hitting those leads for you 6, 7, 8 hours a day, just getting through those cold leads and booking appointments for you. That's how you're going to scale up your schedule or your team's schedule. But initially, get on the phones yourself, figure it out from beginning to end, see the process from when you cold called somebody to when panel and glass is on roof, right? And that it gives you a good foundation to know where the weak points are and who to train and how to train, and everything like that. But yeah, and if you are bringing on additional people, whether it's external teams, like right now, we're looking to diversify and supplement our appointments. So we're interviewing a few groups. Just be careful. If you know the processes, if you've done inbound and you've done the calls, I always ask, hey, what's your sales philosophy? What type of management style do you have? Are you guys working remote? And although some people don't like this, I'm asking what script you're using and let me hear their voice samples, because I know what works, right? Probably a bit more than most. So I want to make sure that any teams that I'm bringing on are saying the right things, so that when my closer gets on the call, it's all parallel. Like, you never bring on a team that just says, send us a script and we'll send you appointments. So you're relying on them to perfectly deliver the script that you use to close your deals? No. You need to make sure that you know what's going on behind the scenes. Now, it's a bit tricky because, as I've seen, when you reach out to people and say, cool, I want to know what your guys are saying and how they sound, their responses are, screw you, you're trying to steal my secrets. I'm like, mate, you got no secrets. I just want to make sure that they're doing the proper shit, right? Because I know what's necessary to say to the customer on that first call, so that when my closer calls them up, they're very congruent, they're very parallel. So just know what's going on, right, with your leads, with your operation, with your appointments. And then, if you bring that all together, you diversify. One thing majority of people do not do is diversify. You find success in your cold calling, fantastic, but also maybe spend a little budget from the profits you've earned recently on maybe some Facebook ads. Maybe bring on an appointment setter, maybe pay them hourly, pay them commission, diversify. One thing that we did wrong when we first started out is we put it all in Facebook, baby. And, we'd have a fluctuation in costs for like a few days. Our entire operation was delayed for a few weeks, right? Because you just get a drastically lower volume. So diversify. Find multiple ways to get in front of customers, right? If you can get in front of customers, you're winning, because then all you got to do is learn how to close. Not easy, but you're funneling it all into one spot. So find ways to diversify your appointment sources.
Like it. That's awesome.
Yes, sir.
I mean, you went through that, some gold nuggets, and people that are watching, or the replay is going to be able to rewind that, watch it again, get some more nuggets, because you're dropping some bombs, man. I really, really appreciate that. I know we have ran a little long. I have a few more minutes with you. Would you cool just do a quick Q&A? Just a couple of questions?
Let's kill it.
Solar Pro. Hey.
Nice one.
So, for me, I just want to have one comment in here. Jasper Kuhn, nice. Matthew Kirchner, great stuff, guys. All you, because you're the one doing it all. So thanks, Josh. But I know that you were door knocking since 9 years old. So
yeah.
That makes me want to kind of ask, I know that you were in solar for the last 8 years, but before that, and how was the transition coming into the solar industry?
Okay, so the door knocking 9 years old story. It's interesting because a lot of people ask me, when's the first time you got on the phones? When's the first time you door knocked? I wasn't door knocking solar at 9 years old, I can tell you that. My father and I grew up very, very poor. We were, living off food stamps. So much so that sometimes we didn't know where we were going to sleep. So what we would do is we grew up in White Rock, BC, Canada. And I obviously moved to Australia 8 years ago. But what we would do is we would go around. My dad was an industrial designer, tried to be at least. And so he did architecture designs and stuff for random clients. What we would do is we would go around, and it was my job to knock, probably 100, 150 doors, maybe every month, every 3 or 4 weeks, and try to sell these people on my dad's designing services, door to door, selling my dad's designing services so we could, afford to get rent or a hotel. What?
At 9 years old, you're doing that?
Yeah. So, me and my dad were out there, right, knocking these doors, and if they didn't want it, right, we give them flyers, just like we give solar vouchers. Hey, this is what we do, design, really good at it. If they didn't want it, then we would have to try to convince them to. We'd offer to do their gardening or their landscaping for free in order to stay in their basement apartment for a week for free. So we were doing that a lot just to make ends meet and to get a roof over our head for quite a few years. Yeah,
easy.
that's the start of the door knocking. But it's very similar, right? You're knocking on a total stranger's door. You're trying to get something from them. Back then, it was necessary. Like maybe I had a bit more desperation back then because I needed somewhere to sleep. But I'm still desperate for the solar. Don't get me wrong.
But you don't sound it. That's the trick, right?
That is the trick. Indifference. Yeah, my transition to solar. This is an interesting one as well. So I moved to Australia as a backpacker. I was just bored. I was working construction in Canada. I spun the globe and my finger landed in Australia. It was either Australia or Russia. I chose Australia. And I got to Australia
too, so I'll just let you know.
I mean, I didn't know much about Australia. I thought it was just all beach huts, right? We were not super educated in Canada about everywhere else in the world. But I got to Australia and they, had maybe $1,000 to my name. I was like a teen. No, I wasn't a teen, maybe 20, 21. I can't remember. 8, 9, 10 years ago. Who knows? It's all history. I was trying to find a job, right? And so the jobs in the hostels that I was staying at, one of the guys, he said, I'm working at a call center, right? It's like $500, $600 a week. I'm like, oh, wow. I haven't seen that amount of money for, ever probably. And so this call center, I can't remember the name, but what it was run, and this was not solar, but this is my transition period into sort of this area. It was run by, in Australia we call them bikies, which is they're gang members, and they were selling.
It doesn't sound as tough as bikers over here, but
bikies. Okay. In Australia they say e's and ads at the end of all the sentences, but yeah, it's bad. It's not a nice word in Australia. So it was run by bikies. It was all gang member affiliated. The owner of this call center was a 21-year-old guy. He's a tattoo head to toe, completely roided out of his mind. Rolling around on one of those hoverboards. Remember those?
Yeah.
Around the office. And it was investments. It was Wolf of Wall Street. It was Forex. It was horse racing software. We would just try to sell anything to anybody. We were required and expected to be able to get like a $30,000, $40,000, $50,000 sale within a 10, 15-minute cold call. And that's contract signed, like charged to card. So it was an intense experience. I'd never experienced this before. And I'm just a kid at that point. I'm like, I have no clue. Got into some interesting activities there. So, but I was forced into this extreme phone-based, sales-based, hardcore sales-based stuff. I left that because one day the owner came over and said, if you don't eat your script, I'm gonna beat you the fuck up, right? I'm gonna kick you out of here and you're going. And all my friends were watching, all my coworkers. I got the script in front of me because maybe I said a word wrong. I'm like, all right, screw it. So I packed my bags and got out. He grabbed me, looked for if I was bringing any stuff that could incriminate him or anything like that. Thankfully, I was just like a junior guy, so I wasn't a part of any of like the super sketchy stuff. A week later, it got raided by the police, and all the senior sales guys and managers and owners got arrested. I saw it on the news. So they were just employing these backpackers that didn't know anything, cold calling and trying to sell people stuff, right? But so anyway, I left that and I was doing interviews. I did backpacked up the East Coast. Eventually got down to Melbourne, in South Australia, in Victoria, but in the south of Australia. And I was doing some interviews, and I met a group there. And they pitched me a door knocking spot, right? It was for energy or for charity or something. And I said, look, I've done that before. I don't really want to do that, but hey, I know how to close on the phone. Like, you want me to do that for you? And it turned out this guy was from Manchester, England. My dad was from Manchester, England. And then the other owner of the company, his name was Jesse King. My name is Josh King. So I think that let me in. They're like, okay, let's see what you got. We're like, I'm saying, well, okay, what am I selling? I don't care what it is. You put me on the phone, I'm going to sell it. They said, there's this new thing. Okay, this is 2014, 2015. New thing. It's solar. I'm like, solar? And I'm like, what do you mean, the panels? And they're like, we're not really sure, but you can try to sell it. And I'm like, sign me up. Let's go. They put a super cold list in front of me. I got on the phone within like 10, 15 minutes. I booked like 2 people in. They looked at each other and they're like, are you thinking what I'm thinking? And then the rest is history from that. I built out a massive solar team with that marketing company over the next 6 months to a year. And just kept building new stuff. And
that's a great story. Not only you have a cool name, but you're getting jobs with your name too, bro. That's
yeah. It's a rare last name. At least it is for me. So I guess when you meet someone like that, you give them an extra 5 seconds to chat, right?
Yeah, if I had met somebody else with the last name Musakil, I'll probably talk to him for a little longer.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, so, that's my origin story. It was really just, what is solar? No clue. Okay, I'll try to sell it, and then it just spiraled from there. Just happened to be the new cool thing, right?
Hey man, everybody has their story, and I love that one. So we talked about what you did before solar, during solar, your virtual, and from Australia to the US. What's next for you, man? I'm just curious. What's your plan? What are you trying to do?
Yeah, I think the US market is not only the present, but it's the future, because of how we see the market going. I have 2 things that I'm really focusing on right now. One is my virtual team. It is my baby. I see it as the culmination of all my experience sort of packed into just a super tight, super efficient team filled with guns and tech and automation that, if I wanted to, I could, run from anywhere. And I have, so that is, that's my foundation. That's my primary focus on maintaining that, finding lead sources, getting these guys rocking, making them happy, putting money in their pocket, creating that environment. So that's what I've been focusing on really heavily for the past, year and a half, 2 years since we moved everything virtually. But then with the US, I just want to get involved. I know that when you add value to operations, more opportunities come. And I have, a long list of groups that I've helped in Australia, in which that gave me more opportunities. So right now, I'm just trying to get involved. I'm trying to add value to other operations. I really like being able to go into an operation that maybe isn't aware of certain methods, certain tools available to them, or maybe they don't see certain things coming, certain sales philosophies, going in there, really shaking things up, changing their systems, changing their processes, and immediately, 2xing, 3xing their results in a matter of a few weeks. I've done it before, and it's a high ROI for me in terms of happiness and productivity, because it's happened to me. I've done it. And so I see other people breaking that barrier. Maybe they don't understand a certain tech, a certain way of communicating customers. The scripts that the Americans generally, what I see, are using are pretty bad. So just how to communicate solar to customers in general, how we do in Australia versus the US, I think there's a lot to be learned. So for me, I'm looking to get involved in exciting groups, showing them something they haven't seen before, and adding value to their life. And then into their operation, and then working on my virtual team and just continuing it, making it solid, and doing some exciting things in solar. That's the basics.
That is Josh King, everybody. You guys seen him on Facebook. Always has great comments, always engaging. Now you have a face to that name and that word. So if you guys are thankful, he's came on and gave us some gold nuggets on virtual and the Australian market. Go ahead, put in there. Thank you. And we're not done yet. Next week, we got another amazing solar pro, JC Rangel, who is a power mentor, who has only, I think, been in solar for 2 years, and he's a monster. He's going to come on and talk to him a little bit about solar and what he's doing. But Josh, last question before I let you go, man. Any last thoughts? If somebody wants to reach out to you, how can they reach out to you? And any other last thoughts you want to leave off with?
Sure. You can reach out to me, Josh, at sunfactory.solar. It's not Fun Factory. A lot of customers mispronounce it. Although we're real fun as well.
There you go.
Josh at sunfactory.solar. Look, I'm getting, I really want to get involved with as many people as possible in the US industry. So reach out to me, whether it's on Facebook, Josh King, Instagram, Josh David King, LinkedIn, Josh David King. You can put a Josh David King anywhere, I'll pop up. Message me. I'll try to add value to anyone's operation, really, and see what we can do. So good stuff.
That's awesome, man. Thanks again so much. And sorry again for the technical difficulties. We'll try to get that post back on the group. And JC Rangel, we're not going to have the same issues next week, bro. So we'll be good. Josh had to deal with it this week, but awesome, man. Thank you again so much, Josh. We'll see you again, bro.
No worries. Thanks very much, mate.
Over and out.